My nonprofit just increased starting salaries to compete for new talent, but now our long-term employees are making almost the same as brand new hires. How do we fix this without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I think this is a real issue these days, particularly as nonprofits seem to be struggling to attract new employees and find good talent. So I don't think you're alone. A couple of just very practical things. I'm curious to know if you already have a system in place. What I've seen happen at a lot of organizations is they actually do like a comp analysis of all positions, and they have like kind of compensation guidelines that you have to stay within. You could go to the high end of that when you're trying to recruit someone who's, and it really like that hot talent that you want. But it sounds like maybe you don't have that in place, which is why you're kind of in this spot. So I would look at this as an opportunity to do like I say a comprehensive like salary audit of sorts, where you can start to see kind of like how bad is this across the board, and then figuring out from there, like, are there other ways? Because like you said, you don't want to break the bank. Is there a way to make it equitable for all? Or can you look beyond non-financial, non-comp ways, like think about the whole package and the whole like non-monetary benefits piece as something, professional development, flexible work arrangements, whatever, those kinds of things. I guess in my mind, I feel like it might like something like that could potentially work. I think regardless though, and I will really defer to Andy, because Andy, I know you've probably dealt with more of these kinds of HR issues than I have, but I also would say that I think transparency with staff is the key with all of this, because the reality is that employees, right, are legally allowed to talk about and discuss compensation if they want to. I mean, you don't want them necessarily to, but they can, and they do. And so if they're already talking about it, that's where you start to create a lot of like mistrust internally of, well, this is ridiculous, right? I've been here 10 years and like this person's coming in doing the same job I am, but making way more or whatever the case is. Like, I think trying to be transparent with staff, saying, listen, we are just, you don't have to, necessarily tell them all the details, but that you're looking at compensation, you're looking at the whole package, you're looking at how to make sure compensation across positions is fair and equitable. I think that kind of stuff employees appreciate, and they appreciate like hearing it, so that it's not something that's like being done on the side, but that they know, this is what's a fair, equitable process. So that's my non-sophisticated HR answer. But Andy, you probably are either going to correct me or have other ideas.
No, I think you're on the right track for sure. I'm always amused whenever I'm working with somebody on a budgeting project or a big planning project, and they're super cagey about salaries. Like they'll say, like, we'll start to do the salary part of the budget, and they'll be like, oh, this is really confidential, don't share this. And I want to remind everybody that everybody's salary is always listed on every grant application that you've requested. So it's effectively public information. So pretending that it's supposed to be secret what everybody makes, it just means that you're trying to come up with some sort of cover to do things that aren't fair. Like you're using that as an excuse. Well, it's supposed to be confidential. Well, it just means maybe made a bad decision in the first place. So I always address it from, first of all, like Stacey said, there has to be a system in place first. You have to think about, how do we compensate people? What's the process for determining what salaries are? What's the process for determining when salaries should be adjusted? Are they too high? Are they too low? How do we get the information to be able to say this is the appropriate range for this position? Like, what if the job changes? This is the thing that happens the most, is you look at your staff and you say, okay, I need to deploy this person in a different role. They were making this much money. The new role pays a different amount. What if it's lower? Are you going to actually lower somebody's salary because you're moving them into that position, or are you not going to do that? So you have to think about all these things. There's a long way of saying you have to think about all these things first and determine these are the rules that we're going to follow for setting salary, and then follow those rules. So that's number one. Number two is be very, very careful not falling into the trap of somebody new coming in is shinier and more likely to be a better employee than the people that we have on staff now. So we need to pay them more. What you're saying by saying it that way is the people that have been here for a long time are old news. And even though it's going to cost me more to hire a new person than it is to have my old person, like those salaries are going to be different. It tells me that they're paying the person who's inside the building too little. Like they need to be paid at least as much as it takes to bring on a new person from a salary level, plus potentially a little bit more because they are already trained. They know what to do. They should require less supervision. They don't need to be directed quite as much because they've been in that role for a while and they can actually do the job. If that's not the case, and if this employee is underperforming, that's a different question. Maybe we need to talk about how do we get this person either retrained or out of the building. Those are the two options you have for employees that are underperforming. So bringing in new people at a higher level, if you notice that it's costing you more to bring in new people for a role that you already have, that's a big clue that you're paying your people that are already in the building too little. And we say this a lot, and this is something that never really sinks in. It costs more to hire a new person than it does to retain a current person. So if we're going to use that in nonprofit terms, like we say, it costs more to acquire a donor than it does to maintain an existing donor. It's the exact same challenge, is that there's a lot of extra costs when it comes to onboarding, training, getting somebody up to speed. I don't know about you, but it feels like my track record for hiring, I think, is reasonably good, but I have had to fire people that I've hired that have gone through the entire process and we're like, this guy's going to be great. And then 3 weeks in, you're like, wow, I did not know what I was buying. We're going to have to cut ties with this person because they're a train wreck. And that could be, and I should take some of that responsibility for hiring them in the first place. But that means that was all of that time and energy and effort and the amount of time that they were here that I've now lost, because there's nobody doing that job and I have to start the entire process over again. And by the way, all the people you interviewed for that job have now taken other jobs and are no longer available. So you're starting from scratch. So it's very expensive to hire people, and it's always been expensive to hire people. So making sure that the people that are in the building are adequately compensated and are feeling the love from you is job one. And then, which basically says, how do we fix this without breaking the bank? The answer is you're looking at it backwards. So you shouldn't be thinking, all of these people are here and they're too stupid to ask me for more money. So I'm just going to leave their salaries where they are. And these new shiny people we can bring in at a higher rate. Instead, You should be thinking, how do we get more out of the people that we have on the ground and make sure that they're happy and content and do not leave, because it's very, very expensive to replace them. Right? That's the different way to look at it. Breaking the bank is losing well-trained employees that have already bought in on the mission, already know how to do their jobs. That's how you save money, not by nickel and diming the people that are already on staff. I know that's probably not the answer you wanted.
But it's the reality, right? And it's how But if someone's listening to this and they've already made the mistake, right? They offered the huge amount, they got excited, whatever, they don't have these systems in place. They know they need to create the systems and processes, but I guess the short question is there any quick fix to that? Right?
I think, yeah. So say you haven't done a compensation study. And so this is one of the things that big nonprofits are much luckier than small nonprofits, because if you're a big nonprofit, you can spend money on a compensation survey and say, here's all the, you can pay somebody or a company that does this and say, here's all the job titles, here's all their things. How much would this person typically get paid across the United States? And they'll give you a range. And you can say, okay, am I in this range? Am I not in this range? Where do I want to be in the range? Well, you can make those decisions. Smaller nonprofits don't generally have money to throw at that problem, but you can sort of use what someone will pay, what you would need to pay someone to do that job kind of as a proxy. So if you're hiring a new person and they're like, yeah, I'm not going to take that job for less than $18 an hour, that's your floor. That's what you should be paying everybody in-house. And so you can sort of do an informal compensation study by saying, what would it cost? At what level are people not leaving? At what level are people comfortable? And if you're bringing on a new person and they have to come in at $22 an hour, that should remind you that at the next opportunity, you need to up everybody that currently is on staff to at least $22 an hour to match that new hire. The new hire should not be paid more than the folks that are currently on staff, unless there's some other performance problem that you're just too busy to address, in which case you need to take care of that problem, right? Because that's the only potential thing is, well, this person's way better. Like, well, then why? Why are the people that you're currently paying not get better? That's a performance review problem. That's a training problem. That's a explaining to people what their job is problem, and not anything to do with compensation.
Yeah. So there's no workaround for somebody. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but there's no workaround. My idea of the non-monetary benefits is kind of that's not on the table. That shouldn't even be part of, right? Like as a way to make it more equal, like to say, oh, I don't know. Or is that like, does that get a little gray? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. It just feels like it's, if you were to say, and you can try and see if it works, but if you were to say to somebody, look, we're only going to pay you $15 an hour, but you get 4 weeks of vacation, and this person's getting $22 an hour and they get 3 weeks of vacation, and the numbers may actually tie. That might be from an outlay.
Yes.
Perspective, that might actually be the same number to you, but it might not be the same number to the person you're hiring. So and one of the things that I frequently would come up against as sort of a hiring manager is someone would negotiate with me for what their salary was, and we would pay them the negotiated rate. And then later on, they would discover that other people are being paid differently than they are. And my fallback is always, but that's what you asked for. Like, you told me you wanted $22 an hour. Because one of the things that I would put on the application for hiring is, how much do you expect to be paid for this, right? We have a budget. We know what we're willing to spend, but I'm going to ask you, if you're going to take this job, what do you want to be paid? And that would help me do two things. It would help me sort of justify the number I picked, because I have a range, right? I can go from $18 to $25 an hour. Yeah. And if you say 22, I'm like, that's fair. We'll do 22, right?
Yeah.
So that range shouldn't be everybody that's currently on staff that's been there shouldn't already be at the bottom of the range, because in theory, you're doing performance reviews, you're evaluating their salary, they're getting bumps every once in a while based on their performance, and they're getting cost of living increases and all the things that nonprofits are like, are you crazy? Like, we've never been able to do that, right? But those are things you should be doing if we're really talking about serious compensation. But having some sort of basis to talk to an employee about, well, this is why you're being paid this, and this is the system that we're using to determine that, may make them feel like it's less capricious, less just like random, that this new person gets more because, why? Because I like them better or whatever the reason is. Like, no, that's what they asked for, and that was what it cost us to bring that person on. And we're working to make sure that everybody's paid, that the new people don't get paid more than the old people do. But I don't know that like soft things or other things are going to be meaningful to that employee unless you specifically ask them. I mean, some employees come in and, for me, like if I were to take like a full-time job working for an organization all the time, I'd be like, how much vacation could I legally get? Like, what's the maximum amount of vacation I could get? Because I want that.
Exactly.
Right? The salary amount is probably less important to me than just being able to just not be there whenever I feel like it. So, and everybody's different, and you kind of have to approach those salary negotiations in a different way for different people. But there has to be a system in place to be able to justify it, so that everybody that currently works for the organization isn't furious at you because this new person is like they're doing what?
So true. Oh.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board. Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing. Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacy Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Hey there, everybody. It's Stacy Wedding here, and I am hanging out with my pal and fellow podcast co-host, Andy Shurick, and we're excited you're joining us for another episode of Nonprofit Everything. You're in for another great episode. We always appreciate the questions because that's what keeps these episodes fun, interesting, and I don't know, gets us like talking about, we've done some things lately, Andy, where it's like we're talking both like at all altitudes, like really high level stuff, right? And then very in the weeds, and we're kind of like all over the map, but that's because of the questions you're sending. So thank you for that. And enjoy this episode, and remember to send us questions. You can find us at nonprofiteverything.com. You can click that button. You can do questions at nonprofiteverything.com, or you can track down Andy and I in some other way or on the socials. So thanks. Enjoy the episode.
Our organization's strategic plan was created in 2024 and was supposed to guide us through the end of 2026, but it already feels outdated with everything that's changed. Is strategic planning even worth it anymore?
It's a question on many people's minds, right?
I love how that question went from like, here's something, do I just kill it all?
I think it's how everyone's feeling, like, because it's all burning anyway.
Exactly. Can I just leave? Can I go home?
Well, you know, as someone who does strategic planning, I will say that I think traditional strategic plans are kind of dead. I don't know. That's the trend I've noticed. And when I see traditional strategic plans, you know, like for sure, 5-year plans are like kind of like, I don't even hear anyone doing that anymore, nor do I recommend it. And 3-year plans, particularly in some of the environment, and Andy, you and I have talked about this in several questions and just episodes, right? Like we're in a very uncertain like environment, and nothing is necessarily stable or predictable. So I think there is a role for planning, but I also think it needs to be, we need to do it differently and change kind of our approach to it. So, instead of like, you know, the good old fashioned plan where you're like, here's our 3-year goals, and then here's how we're going to get there, and here's how we're going to measure it, you know, on a quarterly basis or whatever. What I'm seeing more organizations doing is saying, all right, let's create our North Star. Like, what's our North Star of like, where do we want to be? Like, given all the things, where would we like to be several years out, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, make that whatever you want. But like sort of like that really big picture, like this is where we're going. And then figuring out how to build kind of an engine that's like almost like an 18-month rolling plan is what I'm seeing. And so like, so you're still kind of saying, all right, in the next year and a half, here's how we're going to like continue to like move toward our North Star, like our big goal, right? Like our really big goal. And here's how we're going to do it. But then like on a monthly or quarterly or whatever you want to do basis, you're updating it and then like adding more, like adding another layer to it. So it's very like real time strategic planning instead of like this fixed point in time. We do a strategic plan. Everyone follows it. We're not reforecast, just like, you know, we've talked about budgets, and I know how you feel about reforecasting budgets, Andy, but like, I think too many people like that create strategic plans that just live there, that are static documents and aren't designed in a way that can start to be malleable with data they receive, what's going on in the environment around them. It's a recipe for disaster, right? Like it's not. And so gone are the days of this sort of really stiff, rigid way of doing it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't, like, otherwise you've got everyone doing everything like with no direction or no sort of sense of what you're trying to accomplish. So I don't think we should die, like kill strategic plans, but I also think we need to kind of figure out a new approach to some of this is kind of my 2 cents. And at least what I'm seeing out there and the way people are thinking about their planning and actually starting to think more like integrating strategic thinking, like how do we strategically think about making some of the decisions we're making, and like trying to build it again into real-time analysis instead of this like one point in time that everyone dreads. Oh God, we're here for another strategic planning session. And you see, there's nothing more unpopular than saying that, other than maybe creating a budget. So I don't know. What do you think, Andy?
No, I think I have questions for you. So what does that look like then? So the sort of classic model is you have your mission, you talk about like what the ultimate purpose of the organization is and what better looks like far in the future. And then you say, okay, so this is what our activities are, and this is how our activities support that ultimate mission. And then these are the sort of the targets that we're going to hit in certain areas to support those activities. So it's very like, it's kind of like a pyramid, right? With the mission at the top, and then everything kind of filters down. But if you're doing it on a more sort of iterative basis, like what are you actually doing? What's the process that happens?
I think you're building in, instead of as much upfront time at the beginning of it, spending months creating a strategic plan or whatever, like it is, you're maybe shortening that cycle, but adding time more along the way for the data, the analysis every 90 days. So like, and I say every 90 days, some people would argue like it's sort of the thought process with rolling 18-month plans is, instead of like a strategic plan where we might say every year, did we hit this? Or like, are we going to wait till the end of the 3 years to see if we hit it? It's much more iterative. Like, we still have measurables. We still have activities that are trying to move us toward that North Star goal. But like, we're very much like spending maybe a half day every 90 days or whatever, fill in the blank, where we're starting to like say, okay, the data that we just like what we're seeing and what we're hearing, and oh wow, there's that federal policy change or whatever, like is going to impact the way we're doing this. So let's figure that out of like, are we staying on that track? Or are we iterating right now to say, not that we're just throwing it out every time it's not working, but really sitting down, doing the analysis of like, is this working or is this not? And what else do we have to add in or build in or change with sort of like in a micro task or activity way, like that will change, like that could change, like, okay, maybe the goal or like where we're trying to go is still right, but like how we're going to get there needs to completely change because we've had to cut staff in half, or, we haven't gotten the government funding. So it's just, instead of like, gosh, the plan's dead and now we don't worry about it for another 3 years, or like no one looks at it because it's irrelevant, you're kind of keeping it real time. I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like it's clear in my head, but I'm not sure I'm being clear in the way I'm describing it.
So you still have the overarching goals.
Yes.
You still have like, this is what we're going to hit for our target on a particular date, but you're looking at maybe the program areas or specific tactics that you're using to be able to say, this program, we thought it was going to be here by this date, and it turns out that this other thing we were doing is going to be a little bit better. So how do we shift investment from the underperforming thing to the overperforming thing and like sort of leverage that as we go? So it's almost like thinking about the organizational activities more often, because the strategic plan is, and one of the challenges that nonprofits have too, is that the sort of inertia of, we've had this program for a really long time, and that program manager, he's been there for 25 years, so let's not touch it because he's really old or whatever.
Right.
And so that one day you get this legacy program that you just run with because you've always had it. And this is a little more, I would say, like agile, to be able to adjust on the fly to things that you see based on external forces and how things are playing out.
Like,
okay.
That's a great way of synthesizing it. And I also think it's tied to, like, you think about what we did during COVID and pandemic, and everyone was like, well, there goes all my plans. Oh, I just got done with the strategic plan. That's out the window, right? Or like, the current administration and people who planned and had everything set up before the administration started. And then, the world got shaken by some of the changes happening, and the, federal government and government grants. And so being nimble enough that you either don't like completely throw out the plan, or you're adjusting in real time to the realities of what's existing. So it is kind of like it's more activities, but I guess I also want to say there's sometimes it's just like, okay, these handful of directions we were headed toward to get to our North Star goal, one of them needs to completely go because we now know there's a new sheriff in town. We're not under the same administration. We have different, the trends are pointing toward this isn't going to happen. So this is actually like a really broken part of our strategy if we keep this in here. So what are we going to do to replace it? So it's also kind of like not waiting too long to make the changes because you're actually paying attention to it. And I like that way of thinking because it's just the world is like constantly. I mean, look at technology. Like tech is a positive. I mean, to some people, right? Tech could be a positive thing, but like I can't even predict where we're going to be with tech in another couple years. And so it's and how that could change the way I'm planning for things. And so I don't know. I'm a fan of it. It's also some people like hate the idea of having to go through like a constant analysis and thinking about. I think I don't know. I feel like that's the way we need to go, at least, at this point in time.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've always liked about the nonprofit sector that for-profits get wrong is that for-profits have that sort of quarterly earnings mindset where they may make decisions specifically to hit a quarterly earnings target that aren't in the best interests of the organization over the long term.
Yeah.
I think my only concern with like iterative planning activities is that we do lose sight of, well, we kind of have to stick with this for a little bit longer to watch it pay off. Like things that work on a longer cycle than every 90 days, things like direct mail, things like programs that may have to take a long time to see the results of the program, and that we want to stick with them even though they may not be performing the way we expect them to right now. I can see it. I think that would be my only like negative reaction to that was like, are we just gonna like throw the baby out with the bathwater just because it's time to think about something new? I think I like that long-term view that nonprofits have, and would want to make sure we've baked into the process some way to keep that there, some way to prevent that from going by the wayside.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Like, I don't think this process is about, I think there's nothing worse. You and I have seen it. I see it. It makes me cringe. I see it a lot with boards that I work with that, I don't know, one event didn't work or some piece of it didn't work. And they just are like, all right, that we're done with that. We're going to do something else. And like, it's just, instead of saying maybe we need to look at the way we did it or the approach or like, I don't know, like other pieces of it before, like at what point do we say this is a lost leader? Like it takes time, right? And to your point, Andy, and so I think there's kind of this process bakes in some longer term questions that keep you from like reacting. But if you're sort of in a case of like COVID or like something that's big that's happening out there, like societally, that it's like what we just said that like in one of our other questions we were talking through, right? Like we talked about, everyone's best guess right now is that probably government grants and federal funding is not going to be a smart strategy for the next several years. So if for some reason, like there is something that's that obvious where you're like, this is probably not something we're going to like keep banging our head against the wall, continuing to do the same thing, even though we know what everything out there is saying, you change it. And so I think it's a bit of both. I think what you're saying is true. Like that would be awful if someone was just like, let's change this. Then you're like, okay, then you might as well not have a plan at all. Cause
yeah. For somebody like me, who's very like, I like things to be the way they are. I want to know what's going on at all times. I don't like just massive amounts of uncertainty aren't my favorite thing.
Yeah.
So that I would struggle with that, I think. Thanks for joining us, everybody. That is it for another episode of Nonprofit Everything. We're happy you joined us. We appreciate the questions when you send them in, so keep doing that. Questions@nonprofiteverything is the email address, or you can go to the nonprofiteverything.com website where there's also show notes for every show, and there's a big button to click that says ask a question. That gets to us too. By the end of these, I can't even talk anymore. That's the problem. I'm not even going to edit that out. I'm just going to mumble. So I think that's where we'll end it. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.